It is 1943. A man on the floor of a welding plant in Cleveland, Ohio, brings home more money than most of the executives running the place. He is not a manager and not an engineer, just a man who assembled machines by hand and was paid by the piece. When the federal government learned what these workers were earning, it did not applaud. It opened an investigation, accused the company of war profiteering, and demanded the money back. So the company did something almost no American manufacturer would dare. It sued the United States government and fought for most of a decade for the right to make its blue-collar workers wealthy. The company was Lincoln Electric, and that fight with Washington was only the beginning of its story. Now back to Cleveland and a $200 idea. The man who started it all was John Cromwell Lincoln, and in 1895 he was not a captain of industry. He was a broke inventor, born on a farm near Painesville, Ohio in 1866, the eldest son of an English-born preacher who quarreled with his congregations and kept the family poor and constantly moving. John Lincoln had clawed his way to an electrical engineering degree from Ohio State and then gone to work at the Brough Electric Company in Cleveland, the firm of arc lighting pioneer Charles Brough. He understood electricity when most of America still ran on muscle, steam, and gaslight. He had already started one electric company and watched it dissolve in the financial panic of the mid-1890s, taking his savings with it. What he had left was a better motor design and a customer who believed in it. A young chemist named Herbert Dow, the man who would go on to found Dow Chemical, paid John Lincoln $200 to redesign an electric motor for him. That $200 became the seed. On December 5, 1895, in a small shop in Cleveland, John C. Lincoln used it to found the Lincoln Electric Company and began building direct current electric motors of his own design. They were heavy, simple, and almost impossible to kill. Durability became the company's signature long before anyone wrote it on a brochure. For more than a decade, Lincoln Electric was a motor company and a small one. John Lincoln was an inventor first and a businessman far down the list. Over his life, he would hold 55 patents. His mind was always 3 steps ahead, on the next mechanism, the next winding, the next problem. What the company lacked was someone who could sell and run the place while John disappeared into the workshop. That someone walked through the door in 1907. And he happened to be John's younger brother. James Finney Lincoln was a different kind of man. Born in 1883, he had captained the Ohio State football team of 1906, a squad that went undefeated and remarkably never allowed a single touchdown all season. He was competitive in his bones. He was also, by his own account, broke and humbled. In the spring of 1907, typhoid fever knocked him flat and ended his studies before he could finish his degree. He came to his older brother looking for work, and John gave him a sales job. $50 a month plus 2% commission as the company's first and only salesman. The man who had captained an undefeated team was now knocking on the doors of machine shops trying to convince skeptical foremen to buy a Cleveland motor. He turned out to be very good at it. By 1914, John Lincoln, restless and bored by the daily grind of running a business, did something few founders ever manage. He let go. He turned the management of the company over to his 31-year-old brother and retreated into pure invention. From that point on, the two halves of Lincoln Electric were clear. John was the engineer, the man who made the machines. James was the manager, the man who made the company, and he was about to bet the whole enterprise on a technology almost nobody took seriously. Around 1909, and then, in a more refined form in 1911, Lincoln Electric produced what it described as the first variable voltage single-operator portable welding machine. Welding was still a curiosity, a way to patch a cracked boiler or repair a broken casting. The structures of the world were held together by rivets, millions of them hammered red-hot into steel by armies of men. James Lincoln looked at the welding arc and saw something the riveters could not. He saw the future of how heavy things would be built. Ships, bridges, skyscrapers, pipelines. If you could fuse 2 pieces of steel into one continuous piece, you did not just save labor. You made the structure stronger than rivets ever could. So the motor company quietly became a welding company, and then it became something stranger than either. It became a social experiment. This is the part of Lincoln Electric that made it one of the most studied companies in Harvard Business School history. James Lincoln was the son of a preacher, and he ran his factory on a creed he traced back to the Sermon on the Mount. He believed the untapped capacity of an ordinary worker was effectively limitless if you stopped treating him like a cost and started treating him like a partner. As James himself put it, there is no limit to the production capacity of a human being. The question was how to unlock it. His answer became incentive management, built piece by piece over 40 years. It began in 1914 with the advisory board, a group of elected representatives from every department who met with the company head every 2 weeks. Floor workers could raise grievances, suggest improvements, and shape policy face-to-face with the man in charge. That board has met every 2 weeks since. One result was that Lincoln's Cleveland workforce never unionized and still chooses not to. James Lincoln called the kind of conflict between labor and management that defined American industry a form of civil war, and he intended to end it inside his own walls. Then came the money. Around 1915, Lincoln moved its factory hands onto piecework. You were not paid for the hours you stood at your station. You were paid for the defect-free pieces you produced, and only those. If you made a bad part, you fixed it on your own time for free. In 1934, James added the second half of the engine, an annual merit bonus funded from company profits. That first year, the bonus averaged around 30% of a worker's regular pay. In the decades since, the company has set aside roughly a third of its pre-bonus profit every year for that pool, and since the mid-1950s, the bonus has averaged about 77% of base pay. In good years, a Lincoln worker's bonus nearly doubled his salary. Put those two systems together and you get the reality of the Lincoln factory floor, which was nothing like a utopia. It was a pressure cooker. If a machine broke down, the piece rate worker standing next to it stopped earning while he waited for maintenance. So, the men learned to fix things fast or fix them themselves. The year-end bonus pool was finite, which meant every worker quietly competed with the man at the next bench while depending on him for the company's overall profit. A slow or careless new hire did not just hurt himself, he shrank everyone's bonus, so the workers policed each other hard. Outsiders who toured the plant sometimes called it a sweatshop, and the washout rate among new hires was brutal. Many could not take the pace or the pressure and quit within months. But the ones who survived the first year tended to stay for life because the men who lasted were, by American manufacturing standards, getting rich. To make that bargain complete, James Lincoln added one more promise. Guaranteed continuous employment, adopted on a trial basis in 1951 and made formal policy in 1958. It guaranteed that any worker with 3 years of service would get at least 30 hours of work a week, 52 weeks a year. Lincoln Electric has not laid a guaranteed worker off for lack of business since 1948. In a downturn, instead of cutting the workforce, the company sent factory hands out to sell welders or put them to work painting the plant. In exchange, the workers accepted total flexibility about what they did and when job security for effort. That was the deal. That deal produced an extraordinary moment during the Second World War, and it nearly destroyed the company through no fault of its own. When America went to war, it needed steel hulls faster than rivets could ever join them, and welding was the only way to get them. Lincoln Electric became one of the central suppliers of welding electrodes for the entire war machine. The company later estimated it furnished at least a third of the electrodes consumed by the nation's ship, tank, pipeline, and synthetic rubber programs. The numbers were staggering. A single Liberty ship swallowed roughly 160,000 pounds of welding electrode. A Victory ship took closer to 190,000. The American shipyards built more than 2,700 Liberty ships in 4 years, and Lincoln's electrodes ran down the seams of an enormous share of them. The war work reached well beyond American yards. Lincoln shipped machines abroad under Lend-Lease. Among them, a single order of 750 diesel-driven welders bound for the Soviet Union worth more than $1 million, and a comparable contract for gasoline welders headed to Britain. Cleveland was arming both the American war effort and its allies, one electrode and one machine at a time. The plant ran flat out around the clock, and because the workers were paid by output and shared in the profit, their earnings exploded. In each of the war years, the bonus exceeded the workers' base pay. In 1943, the average Lincoln employee earned about $5,500, a small fortune for a man in work clothes.